Hey everybody, Chris Clegg from Portland Marketing Analytics, or PortMA here. And today we're going to talk about how to collect data from consumers when you're on site at the event. Now, when the consumers exit your footprint, they represent an enormous opportunity to get some insight from them, most specifically to understand how that experience that you delivered impacted their future intention with the brand that you were serving. There are three things you want to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what kind of information you want to get from consumers. The first is reach. You want to know who they are. The second is impact. You want to get a measure of how well you moved them through the purchase cycle, or how well did you create some kind of behavior that would lead to a revenue generating event that wouldn't have existed otherwise. And the last is value. You want to make sure you're collecting that data in a way that you can bring that reach and impact together, look at how much you spent to achieve that, and understand if the value of that achievement exceeded what was spent, or if you had a positive return on investment. There are two main sources of data that you're going to draw from. One is going to be those field staff recaps. It's going to be the data they provide you at the end of each activation day. It's going to be things like samples delivered, consumers engaged, what time you started, what time you ended, how many staff were on site, those kind of metrics that you're probably really used to collecting already. But there's also some key metrics you want to get from the consumers themselves. You don't have to ask everybody. You just got to ask a cross-section of a few people. But what you can do is you can get a measure from them that allows you to profile them demographically, so you can understand whether or not they represented the consumer target. You can get a sense of their past history with the brand, so you can know if any future behavior is incremental. And you can get a sense of what that future intention of future behavior is. And when you have those three measures, you really have everything you need in order to do all the analyses that we talk about in the RIV paradigm. Now, how you get that data is typically through an exit survey. You're going to have one of your BAs on site, take a break, and for about 15, 20 minutes, ask people as they exit the footprint a quick set of no more than 4 or 5 questions. Now, the way in which that brand ambassador asks those questions are going to make a huge difference in whether this is a high maintenance activity or something that's really simple. And so we encourage and we train folks to do what we call conversational interviewing. Now, that doesn't mean that a person is going off script. It means that the way in which the survey is worded is designed so that it's really easy to answer. It's easy for the consumer to understand what's being said, and it's easy for the interviewer to answer and record those responses. What you're going to find is that the BAs that have a positive perspective, that wear a smile, that go up to somebody very casually and say, I'd love to ask you a couple questions about your experience today. When they have that kind of personality, that is really what caused them to be great BAs in the first place. When they utilize that same skill set to be interviewers, they're going to do a great job. They're going to get the information that you need them to get. So a common question is how many surveys you need to collect. And when you're doing a recap, I'll start by saying you want to have about 400 responses. And the reason is it's going to give you enough statistical confidence to feel like your data is an accurate reflection of all the people you didn't talk to. It's going to give you a margin of error that's considered acceptable when it comes to survey research in general. You don't want to get all those 400 from one event day. You want to spread it out as thin as you can. It's always much better to get a little bit of data at every event day than it is to get a lot of data at only a couple event days. And the reason is you want to spread out that error as much as you can. Any bias that might be represented from one day or another, you want to minimize that by spreading it out very thinly across your entire activation schedule. What you're typically going to see is that you need to get around 12 to 15 a day, and that's going to take somebody less than an hour. One person less than an hour, 2 people about a half an hour, 3 people about 20 minutes each. You can see what I'm getting to. And that 12 to 15 responses, believe it or not, when spread out over your event days, is going to give you a really good set of information on what's happening. And it'll give you some very accurate, almost uncannily accurate information around the consumers you engaged, their past experience, their future intention, and who they were. Now, if you don't have enough event days where 12 to 15 a day will get you to 400 by the time you're done, then you just need to simply take 400 and divide it by your number of event days, and that'll give you a sense of how many you need to have per day. One thing to also keep in mind when you're trying to figure out how many data points you should collect or how many surveys you should collect is that in order for you to compare two groups, whether it be two different venue types, or whether you're looking at men versus women, or you're looking at this kind of activation strategy versus that kind of activation strategy, you need a minimum of 30 responses within each of those buckets, so to say, in order to do the analysis. It's required in order to do certain statistical tests in order to know whether the attitude from one group is different than the perspective and experience from the other group. Now, in many cases, that's going to be no problem. You're going to have more than 30 very easily, especially over 10 to 15, 20 event days. However, if there are certain subgroups that you really want to make sure you have a clear understanding of, you want to keep that 30 number in mind. It's always going to be better to have much more than 30. The closer you can get to 400 in those kind of scenarios, the better off you're going to be. But less than 30, you're going to have some problems with the algebra, and so you just want to keep those numbers in mind. So overall, when you're collecting data from your field, using your field staff to collect data from consumers, you just want to make sure that they're consistent, that they're using all the skills that make them great ambassadors in the first place, and you're keeping that survey extremely short, because all you really need is to know their past experience with the brand, their future intention, and then who they are. Thank you so much. If you found these tips helpful, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share this with your team. We want to keep providing you these practical insights for data collection and campaign management. And here at PortMA, we empower you to measure, to optimize, and to prove the return on investment of your experiential marketing.